What if you could make mozzarella at home? Just 2 ingredients and 0 rennet. As a longtime cheesemaker, when I first heard about this method, I was skeptical until I tried it myself. So in this video, I'm going to show you how seriously simple, quick, and accessible fresh mozzarella can be. No fancy equipment and no rennet necessary. Now, I have made a PDF that has the base recipe, as well as notes from all the experiments I've run, their results, tips for success, and what to watch for. It's totally free, so grab the link below. So, how do you make mozzarella with just 2 ingredients? First up, heat 1/2 gallon of milk to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. I am using whole, fresh, unprocessed cow's milk or raw milk. It's from this morning's milking, but you can use pasteurized store-bought milk too. I actually bought some pasteurized milk for the first time in months, maybe years, to see how it worked. I discussed those results in the PDF. Now, there's nothing magic about heating the milk to 120 degrees. Sometimes my temperature shoots up to 130, even 140 degrees, and I haven't noticed any difference in the final cheese. Because fresh mozzarella is notoriously bland, if you want to enhance the flavor, you can add a pinch of lipase powder to the milk at the start. I know I have said before that lipase is of the devil, but it does have its place with underwhelming fresh cheeses. So if you've got some lipase and you're just sitting on it because you learned too late that it's horrible with aged cheeses, I am so sorry. Now's the time to use it. It doesn't really make a huge difference, but it certainly doesn't hurt anything. So now that the milk is to temp, now's the time to coagulate the curd. Normally we use rennet for this, but because this is a quick, fresh cheese, we're gonna short circuit the process and shock the milk with acid to make the proteins clump. To do this, we use white vinegar. Different milks require different levels of acid to coagulate, so you may need to make a couple batches of this cheese before you figure out the exact amount of acid you're going to need for the milk you're using. I'm sure many of you are wondering if you can use other acids. The short answer is yes. Lemon juice, citric acid, other types of vinegar. Acid levels do fluctuate and some of them will impart a distinct flavor. This is why I like to use white vinegar with a 5% acidity. It has no flavor and there's no fluctuations with it. I know what I'm gonna get. Once you add the vinegar, stir gently. The separation can take just a couple seconds or it could take up to a minute. There you can see the clear separation right there. If it doesn't ever make a clear separation, do not proceed. The cheese will not form properly. If you need to, just add more vinegar. Once the curds separate, cover the kettle and let it rest for 10 minutes. Now, do not skip this step. I can hear you all saying, but this is a fast cheese, Jennifer. It's supposed to be immediate. I'm hungry now. Cool your horses, folks. This wait time is important because it's allowing the curds to knit and settle, which in turn will provide a better stretch. So set a timer and go water your houseplants or something. Once the 10 minutes is up, scoop the curd into a bowl. This is the part where you're gonna do 3 things simultaneously. First, turn the heat back on under the kettle. You're going to use this liquid to heat up the curds, and you want it to be about 170, 180 degrees Fahrenheit to do that. Maybe even a little bit hotter, but do not boil it. Now second, if you want to salt the mozzarella, now's when you do it, or now's when you can do it. Add 2 scoops of salt, or about 1/4 cup, 60 grams-ish, to the whey. Stir it in and it will dissolve, and then when you add it to the curds, when you're doing the stretching process, the salt will absorb. However, I have noticed that it seems that when I do salt the curd that way, it makes the cheese less elastic. So I have opted to not use salt at all in this process. Now, the third and final thing that you are going to do is absolutely crucial. If you skip this next step, the curds will be wet and mushy, and they will not stretch properly. And you won't get the mozzarella that you're after, and all your time will be wasted, and then that will launch you into an existential crisis. So just do it. While the whey is heating, gently press on the curds to release the whey. Really press on them, dumping all the excess whey back into the whey pot. You can use a spatula or a spoon, but I like to use my hand. If you have made rennet mozzarella before, this kneading of the curd is gonna feel counterintuitive, like you're going to dry out the cheese and it's gonna turn hard and rubbery, because with rennet mozzarella, you have to be careful not to overwork it. But here's the thing, because there's no rennet, just acid, the proteins in this cheese haven't really gelled like they do when rennet is used. So this kneading action is doing 2 important things. I'm getting warm, I need to take off my sweater. It's dehydrating the curds and releasing excess whey, and it's manually helping to build structure since there's no rennet to do it chemically. So once no more whey escapes, flatten the curd so as much surface area is exposed as possible. This will help the curd to heat through quickly and evenly. There we go, we're at 190. Now you will notice that it looks like there's a lot of curd in here, and I actually did try to make ricotta with it one time. I added milk, some more vinegar, and I then strained it through a cheesecloth, and I did get maybe a half cup or so, like 5 ounces I think, of very loose ricotta, but it was very acidic and kind of salty because I had salted it. Actually, it tastes a lot like a sour cream. Now, when the whey is hot, you pour it over the mozzarella. It's going to sit for about a minute to absorb the heat and soften. I flip it a couple times just so it's exposed. Make sure it's moving around in there freely. You can also microwave the curds instead of using hot whey, as long as you don't overdo it. Heat them too long and the curds will turn into a gloopy mush. But I said no fancy equipment, so no microwave. Here's a little trick. If the whey is too hot for your hands, chill them in the ice water while you are, maybe, hang on, that's really hot. That just helps to deburn them a little bit, prevent the heat from hurting too badly. As you flip the curd, you can begin to gently stretch on it, press on it, massage it, tease it a little bit. You see at the edges, they're more stretchy. Alternately, you can put the curds back into the kettle to heat up, or you can place them in a strainer and lower that into the pot of whey. But cleaning cheese out of a strainer is a real pain in the ass, and I found that using a bowl is just easiest. Once the cheese feels pliable, give it a couple of good stretches. Whee! I want it to be a little bit softer. Once you start getting some shine on it like that, then you can start forming your ball. Now, while the mozzarella is chilling, let's address the elephant in the room. The thing you're probably wondering about and the thing that I was most curious about when I first heard about this method. Saying this is mozzarella is a little like an artisan bread baker saying that pancakes are bread. Pancakes are in the bread family, sure, and they are fantastic. I love me some good pancakes, but they are a totally different food than a loaf of sourdough. So no, this isn't traditional mozzarella, but it comes close enough in texture and appearance and flavor even to pull off a convincing illusion. Furthermore, it's a real gem of a trick if you find yourself in a pinch. If, say, for example, you want to make pizza for Friday night supper and realize at the last minute that you do not have any mozzarella, you can simply knock out this cheese in less time than it takes you to mix up the dough and set the table. So now for the big question, what does it taste like? And what's the texture like? Does it stretch? Does it melt well? Can you grate it? 10.5 ounces. So regular mozzarella is tangy and milky. The texture is semi-soft with an elastic chew. You tear on it and it comes apart in long strips or ropes. It melts like a dream and it holds its melt while it is still warm. This mozzarella is more mild. Salt does make it a little more exciting if you go that route, but the lack of salt generally isn't a problem because usually we're making mozzarella to pair it with something else. It doesn't have to be a standalone hero or anything. It definitely has a chew. It is milky, but not like juicy milky. It has flavor, and I actually think all this vinegar helps to give it a tang that just elevates the tanginess of a fresh cheese in a good way. It's not as smooth. Got more vinegar in that bite. Oh well. It's not as smooth as a store-bought mozzarella. It's not that glossy texture finish, but it's pretty close. I like it. Let's melt some. Gonna add a little flaky salt to it. Ooh, look at that. So it gets really shiny then. It's really good with the salt. So good. You know what the next test is? Grilled cheese, baby. Lots of cheese, because you know, it's what we're making, grilled cheese. Once it cools, it breaks again, it doesn't stretch. It has to be really hot to stretch. I forgot, I need salt. This mozzarella, depending on how you make it and what kind of milk you use, tends to be less elastic, and some versions, like if you add salt or if you use whole milk and don't add enough vinegar, can be soft and squishy, almost knife spreadable, while other versions, like the store-bought milk and the microwaved version, tend to have more of the classic elastic ropey strings. That said, all these versions do tend to soften in the fridge, and to varying degrees, they lose their elasticity. For this reason, this cheese grates best when cold, and it is best used fresh, like within several hours of making it. However, if it gets too soft to grate or slice, just pinch off chunks and add it to whatever, it will be fine. And all the cheeses melt well with direct heat, like in grilled cheese or on a skillet, on pizzas or whatever. But the cheese does tend to seize back up once it is cooled a little bit. Even so, it still tastes good and has a nice cheesy chew to it. Now remember, I have made a doc with the recipe and method and my notes and experiments and suggestions. Also included is how the cheese holds up when it's frozen. And I explain my hunch as to why pasteurized milk behaves better than raw milk, but does not have as good of a flavor. So if you really want to nail this cheese so you can whip up some fresh mozzarella without even having to think twice, then don't forget to get that link. Now, if you want to go the opposite route and master a cultured, salty, flavorful mozzarella that takes hours to make, has a much longer shelf life, and freezes like a dream, then watch this video next. Happy milk slinging.